Well, hello, hello. We're back for another Wet Ink Wednesday. And this week I'll be talking to Lucie Shearer, an illustrator, an artist, and contributor to the current project, Zero Day War, which you can back on Kickstarter. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later. But first, hello, Lucie. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I always want to know how people like, okay, so we're a nerdy, Wet Ink is a nerdy company. We make like games and stuff. So we definitely want to talk about games and like because like I met you at an Origins game fair. So like I'm gonna guess that you're some amount of like a games person, but also
Yeah.
you were there selling art. So like I think I want to talk about art first, but we can talk about games first if you want to. So like with you know, what's the before we talk about
Like,
the overlap, I think we have to talk about each piece individually, right?
yeah, for sure. So we met, I want to say 2 summers ago at Origins,
Hmm.
game fair here
Yeah,
in Columbus. I was in Artist Alley. I've done conventions for, gosh, like 10 years now,
nice.
various art markets and stuff. And I've tried out different like types of shows, and I have found a home in gaming
Mm.
conventions specifically. They're like my favorite one. So when we met, it was Yumi and Brandon, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
my business partner
uh,
was there. Yeah,
yeah, we
and
hit it off right off the bat, and um, just
uh,
yeah, went from there, I guess.
yeah, we had I mean, you had someone in the booth with you. I some, you know, someone working the booth with you. So it was like,
Yeah.
it's just an all, and that that year 2022 had I I mean obviously there's been a whole pandemic blip and all that kind of stuff, so like I think it's still a rebuilding sort of scene, and there was this whole like wing of the convention hall that just like no one was over there and we weren't busy, so we're like we're going to take time and we're going to go talk to all the artists, and so we did. We basically talked to all the artists that were in that whole area, and you were one of them, and you're now the third person that we met that summer that we've done something with. So
I did see that y'all worked with Sam.
mhm.
He's a wonderful guy, and he has got really wonderful work. So yeah, I was excited to see y'all partnered with him too.
Yeah, yeah. Garbage and Glory is I was working on Garbage and Glory earlier today. It
Yeah,
is he's done so much of the art, and we gotta keep refining, getting the text. It's mishmash of things, and that's this isn't about Garbage and Glory though. But yeah, it's like it's been
oh,
great to
for
like
sure. But as all projects do, they have many steps involved to get to the end
absolutely,
result.
absolutely, absolutely. Uh which I guess is as good a segue as any. We could stop. I don't want to navel gaze myself, but I want to talk about like projects and stuff like that. Like your art is, I don't know, it's like this mix of like monumentality and like pop art colors and
Mhm.
such you mentioned illustration is you mentioned, and it's sort of like it's not fine art in the way that like portraiture is fine art. It's sort of got this like comic booky sort of billboardy kind of feel to it, but that's not to diminish it. It's just it doesn't look like you know Botticelli. It looks more like Frida Kahlo. If that makes sense to you.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I'm, I guess what you would call classically trained. I did go
Yeah,
to an
yeah.
art college. I did a lot of, I really loved my oil painting classes. And if I had the inclination, I could probably go down the Botticelli fine art route if I really wanted to. And every now and then I get into a painting that I'm like, oh, this is a fine art painting. But more often than not, I'm using digital resources these days
Mm,
just because they're clean and easy. And like my iPad is sitting right here. Like it's just,
right,
you can take it anywhere. Whereas oil paints are like a whole process to get out, right?
right.
But it's funny because my artwork started when I was a little kid and I was drawing then. I was copying all the like um I don't I refrained from calling it anime because it was like Digimon, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh, which was on the public TV channel that we watched as a kid. And like those were the three I had access to. And I drew them relentlessly. Occasionally some Sailor Moon made her way in there.
Sure.
Um, but I could only see her on like Saturdays at my grandparents' house. Like so and once I got into high school, I started taking like art classes and doing the more like traditional training of art.
Hmm.
And then in college, went a very traditional route. And then in my mid 20s, I veered right back into the very like stylized graphic look
Yeah.
with my work. So I like to think that I rediscovered my own style after
Mm.
being segued into
Yeah.
something else in college.
That I totally understand that. I also was a kid who had sketchbooks everywhere. I actually went to art school as well. But it was sort of like what it one feature of going to art school was that I don't carry sketchbooks around anymore because I had to do all the drawing and the figure drawing and stuff like that. And so it was like I didn't take the time afterwards to retrain and rediscover my style like he's talked about. I just like stopped it. I was like, oh, now I've done it for real, and I am not as talented as many of these other people are. So
Well,
um,
I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about because I think a lot of people right after art school go through like a dip in their
mm,
creativity. I think it's just you're so burned out from the pace that you create in art school, and then life takes over,
right,
and day jobs and whatever else, and relationships and potential for some people families, and getting back into it can be hard. Um, I truthfully kind of lost myself a little bit for a couple years right after art school, and um, it wasn't until I was single again and was like, I need to focus on this. About 2 years after I graduated, that I like dove right back into it, and I've been kind of narrowly focused on that since. But yeah,
so you said you went to school for illustration, I think
mhm.
maybe before we pushed the record button.
Oh
So
sure.
is that because I mean I had like a painting class and I had like a charcoal drawing class and I had a printmaking class which I really really liked. I didn't take that one until my last semester, and I'm like, I should have taken this first, I would have done this. um but so did you have like illustration? Like what is that different from just a painting or drawing class? Did you learn what did you learn in that class, or what made it you went to school for illustration? What does that mean?
Yeah, I when I went to college initially, I was going to go into fine art, and my parents really tried. They were already making a little leeway for letting me go to art school, and they were like, you need to pick a degree that's not just like something that's going to have a job when you step out of
Hmm.
school. And so I, at the time in 2007, was like, oh, illustration is like the halfway point. This is not true, by the way, but in my mind, it was the halfway point between graphic design and fine art.
Hmm.
Um,
It
if you were
feels,
to ask me
yeah.
today what that is, they're three very different things, but they can
Hmm.
all pull from one another.
Sure.
Um, and uh, for your question, in terms of what I learned in school, illustration is how do you get a message across instantly with an image.
Hmm.
It can be very commercial, but it can also be very expressive. Whereas graphic design also is like how do you get a message across very quickly, um, form and function meeting in the middle kind of situation. But also like graphic design also really leans into messaging and very text based,
Yeah,
whereas
yeah,
illustration is very imagery based.
yeah.
So they kind of live in similar worlds. My day job currently is as a graphic designer. So I feel like they very much tie into each other.
Yeah, it's almost like, I mean, and you saying that it's like about conveying something instantly. You think of when you hear illustration, the number one thing that jumps into my mind is like children's book illustrations.
Mhm.
I mean, there or even I mean illustrated novels of all kinds, but like specifically the picture book style is like that's all about like reducing down to the core of like the communication part,
Yeah,
even if it's
the
even if it's detailed or
simplification.
whatever.
Yeah,
It is because the youngest readers are primarily experiencing it through the pictures, right? Um but I mean, so I find that, yeah, that is helpful to understanding what you're trying to convey, whereas abstract art that has no message
well,
necessarily,
I mean,
that
oh
there's a whole
man, we could
branch of that.
definitely go into a really long conversation about like once you get into fine art, all the different layers and levels and concepts and just like, because I wouldn't go so far as to say that like abstract art doesn't have a message, but
Right. Well,
the way that fine art functions is you have to sit with it a while,
yeah,
typically, to kind of come to an understanding. And it's very much like a storytelling with like layers you have to peel away to understand it. Whereas
yeah,
illustration, if you're doing that in an illustration in a commercial setting, you're doing your job wrong.
right.
In a commercial setting, the idea is, and I'm talking like New York Times article cover illustrations. If the article's about millennials in the workforce or whatever, you have to have an illustration that like gets that instantaneously.
Right.
Um, Whereas I think, and I'm going to segue into our project a little bit here. When
Sure.
we are talking about doing illustration for game art or story art or just
Hmm.
anything like that, I think having something that right off the bat you go, oh, I get that, but also I want to know more. You end up
Mm.
in that in between space of there's more to the story than just what's immediately here, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's
I,
a on that edge. Those you talked about the three groups, like it's on the
mhm.
other edge where you're like you don't get it all at once. It's that's good. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. I also one of, at least in my own artwork, I really like having little clues and Easter eggs and sometimes like symbolism in it to tell a deeper meaning or have like a much longer story behind every piece. Um, but I think that's just because I am naturally kind of like a storytelling kind of person. I just like things to keep going. I want you to dig deeper every time you look at something. So you'll find that in my artwork a lot.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like how to describe your style. Like I kind of stumbled through some comparisons earlier, but like
You're good.
the surrealism is another one that kind of came to mind.
Mhm.
There's some classic surrealists, but also like, just the inverted colors, not necessarily inverted, but we should talk about your colors because that's one of the strengths, especially with the Zero Day War project, is
I
just
like
the
I like non-local color a lot.
non-local. I like that.
Yeah.
What is what does that mean to you? Because
Non-local means it's the color that wouldn't normally be like grass. First thing that comes to mind is green.
sure.
But if you do an illustration where the grass is like lavender and the sky is like maybe pink instead of blue, suddenly there's a mood.
Mm,
You still interpret it as grass, but it's not local color. It's not, the grass isn't actually purple. The grass appears purple
yeah,
because it's that time of day, if you will.
right.
So I really like to play with non-local color, um, and shift the mood of what's happening in illustration with the color, rather than just doing like what you would expect.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, totally get it. Like it's just I'd not heard that term before. Like, but
It's all good.
that is very much what you do, with the I keep seeing one of the because I followed you on social media. That's what good friends do after they meet at a con. They follow each other on
Yeah.
social media. So like I've seen your mural work and I want to talk about some of the mural paintings you did, but there's a one in particular that I'm thinking of this, like it's like a blue person, a face and blue face and green hair, and like the flowers I think are, they're supposed that they're maybe chrysanthemums or some, or mums, of some sort. They're pink and purple the way they're quote unquote supposed to be, but the face is like blue, and it's that non-local color. That's what it is. So anyway, I just having mentioned the murals, I we can you already are talking about Zero Day War and I want to talk about murals. So
No, it's fine.
the thing that I have about I think the one question I have about the mural work is like I haven't talked to somebody who does that before. And like again,
Mm.
through seeing you post about it, I mean, you get up on scaffolds and you're painting like two stories on the side of a building, and like then your other project is like you're going to draw these cards that are going to be printed like 3 by 3 inches or something like that. And is it the same? Like obviously there's a ton of logistics differences between the two scales of project, but is there really that much different that you have to think about when you're imagining painting something that's going to be 60 story or 60 feet tall? uh is there a planning process? And like I have no idea. I've never talked to somebody who paints at that scale before, so I just want to hear about it and how you go about it.
Yeah, for sure. So I, the one of the things that makes me chuckle is the most frequent question I get in terms of painting large scale is how do you know where things go?
Mm.
How do you know how to like get the size correct, which always cracks me up. Because for me, it's just like, well, that's where it goes. Like, but for I think most folks, it's like, but if I were to do it, it would be like this small or whatever. And it's just a matter of like understanding scale and proportion. Um, so I feel like this question was like threefold though. So let me back up a little bit.
I mean,
One, I really, really love the versatility, or not the versatility, but like meeting a challenge in terms of finding a creative visual solution to something. So if I have one project that's like, okay, you have to do an illustration, but the final print is gonna be this big. How do you get a good illustration out of that? Or, and at the same time, here's an illustration. What happens when you put it on a wall that's 60 feet long and 25 feet high? And you're going to come across a couple of, each of those has their own challenges. So like when you're printing small, obviously just in the world of print period, you have to think about the difference between like color formatting and what kind of print process it's going to go through, and where the edges are going to get cropped off, and do you have a bleed, and if there's text in there, you need to have like quiet space or negative space in your illustration for the text to live on top of, so it's not too busy. So there's like all these parameters, and I personally think the more parameters that an illustration job has, the quicker you can find your answer. Whereas like on a mural, your parameters are, okay, you have this giant wall. You also have an uneven ground below that wall, or you have a perfectly flat ground below that wall. Do you get to use a lift? Do you have to use a heavy duty uneven ground lift? Do you have to, I call them that, those are not the real words. Do you have to use scaffolding? Do you have to get it done in a certain time period? Because that'll impact like some of the choices you make as well, right? So I had a mural for a high school once that was in a stairwell, and it had to be done in 4 days. And I was like, and I found out on the fourth day that that was my last day.
Oh, wow.
Come back, so I ended up working really late that day. But anyway, where was I going with this?
Just taking all in the scope of the project. I
Yeah,
imagine
you
there's
got
a
all
lot of
these like things, and so
pre-planning that you have to do.
yeah, and of course you have to take into account like how much of a budget do you have. Sometimes these like public projects, so a lot of them are publicly funded, the murals, have really small budgets, and in order to make it a livable wage for yourself, you have to get it done in a very short amount of time. Otherwise, you end up working for like $2 an hour trying to get this project done. And it's just I have a lot of thoughts about the mural process and pricing for it, which I won't go into today. But yeah, in terms of going big with the work, it's a pretty simple process of like mapping out. I like to take a picture of the wall and then like actually transpose my drawing onto the wall. And then I'll like either measure out the feet, or I'll use a doodle grid. And I'll go on the wall and like measure out where everything goes. And then from there, it's just like trusting myself that I measured it correctly.
Yeah. Do like, I mean, if it's only 25 feet, it may not matter as much, but like, do you make stuff bigger as the higher up you go so that it looks from the ground, like the perspective is
I've never done
right or
that. I've
anything
never
like
thought
that?
too much about that, but I know there are artists who do. But those artists usually push to an extreme of like like, have you ever seen the videos of someone like walking through a parking garage and like it looks like a bunch of random pieces, and as it like gets to a certain
Yeah.
point, suddenly it's a circle,
I
like
not that one specifically, but that kind of stuff where you get
stuff like that.
the
Yeah.
hallway painted on the thing that actually projects out of the wall, so it as you move
Yeah.
past it, it appears to move.
I've never done anything quite like that, but I've seen people who do stuff like that. I know for me, there's when I create a mural for a wall, I create it custom to that wall. It's very rare that you just have a plain wall to paint on. There's always windows or doors or some kind of awning, or it's got a funky shape, or there's like wire like casing and stuff on the side. There's always stuff. So the last thing you want to do is like do a portrait on a wall and then have the like window be like here.
Right,
You're
right.
like, well, okay. Or maybe you
Unless
do. I don't know. That
or
could be,
unless that's a feature, right? That the
it,
eyes open up
it
when the
could
person.
be. So uh with each wall you kind of custom design it to that space, and then of course whoever you're working with, your client or the city, you have to come up with a theme or an idea together. It's not very often that I'm just given space and I just do whatever I want with
Yeah,
like free freewheeling it, I guess. um it's usually a very planful process. Yeah.
yeah. It seems like, I mean, any creative effort is at least some part of a project design or a project management kind of thing, but there seems like there's so much more logistics to painting something large outside with public money than there is like, I did a doodle on my iPad. There's just there's so many pre-steps.
Yeah, I will say about when it comes to painting murals, and at least the way that I work, the actual painting part is the last like 20% of the project.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I,
it's
I
never
I'm
and
not
sometimes,
surprised at all to hear that.
yeah, it's you're getting the specs of what the site looks like, you're planning out when it's going to be done, you're of course working with your client to talk about ideas, and then you're actually going through. I mean, we worked through a process on the game together of coming up with ideas, and sketches went back and forth and stuff. So it's no different with a mural client.
Right.
Um, but sometimes I think with public art, there has to be a lot more people with input,
Mm,
um, depending on the organization that you're working with or the client. Because sometimes it's just an individual client that's like, I want this on my wall, go for
right.
it. And they like, no matter what you put in front of them, they're like, this is great, go do it. And you're like, okay. And then there's other processes where it's like, okay, this has to go in front of a board of 12 people and you have to explain yourself.
Right.
And you have to get good at explaining yourself. You can't just be like, well, I like the color blue. So
Is
yeah, there's it varies every single project.
Sure.
There's very little consistency.
What is that you talked about constraints and like how it's quick to find, the more constraints, the easier it is to find a solution. Is that sort of another iteration of that where it's like, this zoning board and this council of 12 and this budget and this site, and that means that that's the only thing that fits in my brain in that wall is these three birds and this person, and that's it, like, is it, or is there, because there are so many other people, like, is it a lot of
Yeah.
back and forth?
That's a really good question. Because I'd never thought about it to that point before. There's always the possibility of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Mm,
Um, my least favorite situation is when there's a backseat designer or a backseat artist who thinks they know the art better than you, and I'm like, then why did you hire me? Like, um, that doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while you get a very vocal um, person in a group of people who's just really opinionated, and you
sure.
kind of have to be like, okay, we're going this way now, I guess. Like, so I usually try to find the right answer. I really like solving puzzles and finding solutions to things. It's the one thing that makes me happier than anything else on this planet is like, I found the right answer. And
Excellent.
every once in a while you have to go with their right answer.
Mm,
And not just your, but I feel like I'm giving a lot of time to this particular thought, and I feel like that happens maybe once out of every 50 projects. Like, it's
wow.
not that often.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I mean,
it's not
that's a great
very common.
ratio.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not very it's not too bad.
all right. Well, thank you for answering my curiosity about like
No, you're good.
the projects, and working at that scale. It's pretty amazing. So you mentioned before at the beginning about like watching a lot of anime shows as a younger person, and so do you still like the nerdy things, or is it I mean, are you, do you play board games, do you play role-playing games? Are you whatever, or is that sort of like, no,
So
I got too much work, I got too much art to make now?
no. It's actually it's really interesting because I went through this as a kid. I really liked I wouldn't say I was a big anime fan as a kid. I liked just some of it, some of the, I'm gonna call it basic stuff just because it was like what I had access to. I read like one or two mangas and that was it. And then high school came and I was like, oh, this is nerdy and not cool. So I'm gonna shut all of this down. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I kind of started picking these things back up. And honestly, about 3 or 4 years ago, I started going really hard. Like after COVID kind of let up, I was like, no,
Mm,
I don't have time to worry about being cool. Like I'm just gonna do the things that I want to do. I'm gonna like the things that I want to like. And so now I am my I feel like my biggest nerddom is probably my obsession with D&D.
okay.
Um I do a lot of tabletop role playing. I have a campaign I've played with my friends for about 2 years now.
All right.
And I have been slowly attempting to write my own campaign. I've done two
Nice.
sessions of that one. But I also just generally enjoy reading and watching and taking in like a lot of like sci-fi more than fantasy, but I've been kind of getting into fantasy novels a little bit lately too. Um, Still not very much big into anime. I think my attention span for it, I get like kind of like I get distracted and like
Mm.
I just can't stick with it. Like the extent of my animated shows that I watch is like Vox Machina, and that's because of
That's because
Critical
it's a,
Role.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
got a connection to other things.
Yeah. And I don't think that's anything against the quality or like really great storytelling of most of the content that's out there. That's just me not getting to it in time.
Right.
Um,
Well, I mean, right. I mean, you like what you like. I mean, it is that's what you like, like the what uh if you want, you can tell us about your character if you want.
okay. No, I've made a couple characters, but my primary one is her name is Decentra Lafleur, and she is an anthropologist, or she is oh my gosh, a tiefling druid. She's currently a
Okay.
level 8.
All right.
Um, and she has a baby owl bear who named Osgir, who follows her around. He's quite a rascal. He doesn't listen to her most of the time.
That's
Um,
it's because it's an owl bear.
he's an owl bear. He's a baby. He's like, I mean, he's big. He's probably like 120 pound baby, but
Right, right.
he's like, I'm sorry if that made a big loud boom. I don't know if this is working. We're gonna find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, she she has a whole long backstory. Her mother has a whole like her mother's a character that I've built out too, who is a succubus that I want to actually play eventually in the future too. Um, and then she's got like a whole family that I've built out, and like
Wow.
other, or not her family, but like her uncle and all those like cousins and stuff. There's just yeah. But in her campaign, she's with her best friend Eloise, who is a warlock halfling. And the two of them balance each other out really well.
Nice.
Interestingly, because D tends to be the like uh voice of reason and like, well, let's leave the culture as it is. You know, people do the way that they do because it's societally normal for them, and we don't need to bother with their cult. Da da da. And Eloise is like, well, in this particular example, we came upon a town where they were sacrificing people. And Eloise was like, well, they can't sacrifice people. That's not okay. And so Eloise saves the person. And Dee's like, no, you messed up their culture.
Right.
And it's, but then on days that Dee gets really upset, Eloise comes in and is like, okay, let's be reasonable. So like it's this really cool balance between the characters. And they've got this long story, and we've kind of worked out what their story arc would look like long term.
Nice.
Because this is even when we're not playing the game, me and my best friend are like, let's talk about our characters.
You were
Yeah,
clearly excited to talk about it. So
I'm sorry.
no,
I
no.
could go on and on about that for days.
Well, you'll have to just put it all down in your campaign, and then everyone can read about it,
Oh, and
and
the
all your
campaign is
pages and pages of NPCs.
The actual campaign I started doing because there's all these other characters I wanted to do that were unrelated to D. And so I exactly what you just said. I've been writing stuff down. I'm like, oh, well, what if this character did this? And what if there was this story? And how does that tie in? And it's been a lot of fun.
It is
So,
fun to build those worlds and create stuff.
oh
Wow.
my gosh, yeah. One day, eventually, I will have my own Kickstarter when I feel like I've gotten enough stuff put together. But I feel like
Sure.
it's a couple of years down the road.
I mean, like we Wet Ink doesn't publish like D&D stuff, but we could introduce you to some people.
We
We'll
can sort out a book or something. Yeah.
um oh great. I look forward to it. So now we've talked about art, talked about your nerdy background. Now we're gonna overlap the two as foretold and talk specifically about Zero Day War,
Mhm.
which is we were definitely in the it's hard to, it's not like I don't know, we were in the market, we were shopping, we were shopping for artists when we were there and looking for people to match certain styles.
Yeah.
And this is your it often starts with one particular piece that just kind of
Mhm.
stays in the brain. And so for this case, it was the piece that you did I don't even know if there's not really it's not like an empty spacesuit because it's sort of full, but the mask is broken open and it's this very cool piece. It has sort of it's all in pink and yellow, not yellow, but like pink and purple. And it's
Yeah.
it's got a lot of vibes of a certain sort of, it's gravity, it's a spacesuit, all this kind of stuff. So like, oh, we got this future tech, the hacking game, and we want it to be like look like, the net is happening and the future technology. It's like, this is Lucie Shearer all over it. We got to talk to her. And so your from our point of view, you like your style, your that graphic look that we talked about earlier at the beginning of the interview is all perfect for this. So we're so
Mhm.
glad to have worked with you on this game. And but I mean, but tell us how it was for you. Like what you mentioned, or you read a lot of sci-fi. So is there some stuff particular that you were like, oh yeah, I'm ready to draw this because I've been thinking about it, or did you have to go do like some education about like,
I did.
let me go look at the 60s like paintings of humans in space or what, tell us about your process.
Sure. Yeah. Well, for starters, I was thrilled to have you all come up and talk to me. Um, and that particular piece that you're talking about, it was actually initiated by like a collaboration with a brewery, and they had this like space themed beer that they wanted to like do a piece for, and I was like, okay, well, the beer, I'm not going to mention the name or anything because I don't but the theme was effectively like ashes to ashes, but also space. And I was like, okay, well, what happens if you have a space suit that's like shattering at the bottom and at the top, but is complete in the center? So it's like beginning, middle, end, but like kind of it cycles on itself. And it was just a really simple, like floating in space, but the very original design was a silk screen print. So it had to be like just a couple of colors. So it became very clean and graphic. And it's one of my more popular pieces. When I have prints available at shows, people just like go, people are either spaceman people or they're fairies and like ponies and like
Yeah,
princesses. Let's go that way because that's what I have. Um,
those might be the two kinds of people:
oh yeah,
space people and fairies people.
now I have a mermaid in my collection, so now there's also the mermaid folks. They're like, um, uh, and it's so exciting. I love standing behind a table and watching what people are drawn to. It's
Mhm.
just like it's good. It's people watching. But yeah, I tend to do very figurative work. So when y'all were like, okay, we want to do a cover, we want there to be some kind of figure on it, but we want it to be space themed. I was like, oh yeah, like let's do this. Um, and y'all shared a little bit of the inspiration you had for it. And I kind of just took that and ran with it. I think it was I'm not gonna remember the name of it, but it was another like manga cover where she had a bunch of like she was in a big suit and she had a bunch of like tubes coming out and of the suit, and I was like, okay, let's do something with that. But also I wanted to emulate some really brilliant colors I wanted to just like kind of sing off of the page, and I wanted it. I'm like, sorry, my brain is kind of jumping in different directions right now. This is all for the cover specifically. I really wanted
Yeah.
this like cover art to really be like eye catching on a shelf. I want someone to go, "Ooh, what is that?" Because even I built out the space station that she was in, like the room that she's floating in, and as I was building out the room, I was imagining like, okay, well, if this is a door, where does that lead to? And then
Mm.
here's a door, but it's shut, but it could lead to something else. And then up in the corner, there's all these like little like cases behind like little ropes. And I was like, okay, are those different like server packets that you can plug and unplug, like a really old telephone room? Like, what does she do with these? And some of them the lights are on and some of them are not. And I just kind of went down this whole like I was having way too much fun with it. I actually finished drawing the whole room before I put her in it.
Mm.
And
I mean, that seems appropriate.
it was cool. It was a lot of fun. And I really wanted to make sure I emulated the fact that she was in space, like in a
Mm.
space station. So I was like, okay, how do we, she's not sitting in a chair. She's not like, she needs to be floating with all of her monitors that can like click on and off and just be holographic or whatever, floating around her too. So I was really trying to get this, if it were animated, like if it had a little motion to it, you would kind of have this like kind of vibe to it, maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but then with the cards, I found that I had to do like with the cover, I really knew what I wanted and I kind of like went for it. But with the cards, I kind of had to pause and do a little research and like think about like, okay, but what would this look like? What 400
It's
years from now?
yeah, it's 24 or something or other.
Yeah. And the I Matthias had to remind me once or twice. He's like, not all of it's on a space station. Like there are whole planets that are terraformed that we're living on. And I was like, oh, that's right. Okay, I guess I can do a bank on a planet. Like,
Oh, it's
um,
on a planet. See, I imagined it was like a cyber bank, like that it was like just
it
a
it is.
representation of a bank in
Oh,
cyberspace.
like floating in space. It could be that too, but it was just like, how do we like? I feel like 400 years from now, there's going to be certain visual effects that still remain.
Yeah,
And so the idea of a bank and institution, you know, Chase Bank in 2456 still has their Roman columns, and you have to like
yeah,
very intimidating like stained glass windows, and then like these fancy statues out front. Like
right, right. I
not
mean,
getting alone there.
that
Like
that is one of my. I mean, I like that one a lot because of those things where it's like the. I mean, the current culture that we have will be continue the Roman ness of what everybody in Europe and North America, it will remain influential in that way, right? It unless there's a complete cultural reset, like those sort of the big columns, the it's not pendentive. What is that what it's called? The triangular part at the top of the columns, like that look
okay, I don't
will
remember the
look
word, but I think you're close. Yeah.
yeah will remain um it will remain so relevant because it has so much of that history, and like it's been
Well,
relevant for 2000 years. It's not going to
I was
stop
gonna
being
say it
relevant in
wasn't.
400 more years.
Yeah, it's lasted a lot longer than we have.
Well, I mean, it goes back, I mean, 2000. I mean, it's like the Romans learned it from the Greeks, and the Greeks have been building buildings
Yeah.
like that for even longer. So yeah, it's
So
going to be
it's what does the evolution of that look like, right?
right,
And
right.
I some of the other pieces too, like the food one, I did a hydroponic like room.
Hmm.
And at first I was like, oh man, this is so new age, blah 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 blah. And then like I started getting ads on Instagram for like hydroponics at home. And I was like, oh, this isn't that new, is it? Like but I liked the idea of like having this little capsule of like on a space station of like this is the room for the food, like all the greenery, but this is just like for one person's home, not for like a station. You know what I mean? It was a little
Yeah,
smaller scale, but if the way that this game functions, like Sysnet goes down, everyone's impacted. And so it was just really cool. I think one of my favorites are definitely the communication card because I really like drawing the figures and I was having a
yeah,
lot of fun with like the um dynamics of that illustrate like the way that that page fit together. But then also I really liked the I don't remember the name of it. It was orange and it has like a satellite dish. I think it's like for
Oh,
solar power.
yeah, I think it's those
Um,
energy, or yeah, I think it's
yeah, and
energy.
that one I think I was just so tickled with how I was able to get the like I pulled out like my very, very basic engineering architecture skills that I took like one half of a semester course once a long time ago. And I was like, look at me using these straight edges in this perspective. Like
Because
it
it
was,
it shows like an array of solar gathering something,
yeah.
and it is it looks
And
like it's got weight and shape that it's stretching out in all not in all directions, but it is yeah, it doesn't read as like just drawn on there. It's like it looks right. It's like a box. It looks like a unit that would be out there,
and it was
doing its job.
one of those things where I was like kind of impressed with myself. I was like, oh, look what I did. Like it's gonna be this big when it's done, but I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
yeah,
that's so great. I'm glad that you had such fun with it, because it is so. I mean, you never want to like ask somebody to draw stuff and they're like, "Yeah, I just drew it," like whatever, work is work, you know. So,
no, I mean, if I get to that point, usually if I get to that point with a drawing, it's pretty visible in the drawing that like
mm,
it was just a drawing for me. But like if I really enjoyed the process, I feel like that results in better work for me. And so I think it shows in the final pieces.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's there's yeah, such a set of, they're all of a piece, and they have that I don't know if it's non-local color in the case, but they're such strongly contrasting colors. Often your choices are to, the satellite dish, the solar collector thing we were just talking about, it's all orange, but of course the
Hmm.
background of space is very purple, and that's like
Yeah.
in my, like drawing or like painting one, you have to paint a color wheel, and so it's just like choose the opposite sides. Is it
I
is
that
it,
was actually entirely intentional.
yeah,
Pretty much all the colors, I'm sorry, pretty much all the cards had either a complementary color palette or a tertiary color palette. I think the only one that starts to push away from it a little bit is the communication one,
yeah,
but they're all very intentionally like, and I did that because I knew that the cards already had a lot of like meaning behind the color in them because of the way that Matthias had designed the set. Like certain cards had certain colors, and I was like, okay, well, if communication has to be green, I'm making this up. Like, I want to make sure I have a green in there, but also how do I contrast that
right,
without making this look really busy or rainbow? So I wanted like strong pop colors, like pop art colors, but
yeah,
also not enough that like
yeah. it's
ruined
not it's not
the
like
aesthetic of the full game.
it's not orange, it's like goldenrod and like,
Yeah.
violet. It's not like orange and purple, like primary
Mhm.
school. This is a grape and this is a orange. This is like, yeah, they're more, yeah, and like it's teal and pink, and they
Mhm.
are those, like you say, pop art colors. So
Yeah,
it's
it was a interesting challenge to like get my brain back into that mode too for like color theory for school.
mm,
I really enjoyed color theory when I was in college, and it's not something like it comes back out in my work every now and then. Um, but in the series that I'm working on now of my personal work, I've been trying to figure out how to have a very cohesive palette across 12 pieces, but then also make them all feel very individual. It's challenging. Like color in and of itself is a whole science
sure,
um, before you even get to the illustration itself. Yeah.
yeah. So you've mentioned your personal work, and so I want to finish up with you getting to talk about anything else that you might be working on. But before we transition, is there anything final thoughts you want to have about like this particular, set of sci-fi illustrations that you did? Do you have any? Uh, if you got
Mm.
anything else you want to say, now's the time, because I want to move on to the next thing.
Uh, I I really enjoyed it, and honestly, I kind of wish I could do more of the cards and do more things for the game, like draw the planets and stuff too.
Mm. Yeah.
But I know with where, we were at, we had the right number of pieces at the time that we were building it, and now it's getting a Kickstarter, and who knows if it gets an expansion in the future, like a second one. Um,
Right.
uh,
That'd be
I
cool.
was excited to see the communication card got also used as an expansion box.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That was
I
the,
really liked
because,
that.
yeah.
But no, I'm really happy with how it all turned out, and I'm excited to see it like in hand, like
Right.
actually have it. Yeah, a
It'll
real a
be,
real version.
it'll be pretty cool. It'll be pretty
Yeah.
cool. Like that's always, we've got, yeah, yeah, that's at the end of the process, it is nice to have the physical thing. Um, so yes, great. Thank you. So I want to, you mentioned personal work. You don't have to tell us more about it but if you have other things that you're working on, or you're, you know, you've got, you're going to be at shows in this year. Like, what do you want to, where do people want to, what do you want to tell us about, like, other projects that you're working on, other work you're doing, or stuff that just came out? Like, I don't know what other illustrations you might have worked on. You tell me what's the newest from you.
Well, I have been, I mean, I guess it's not terribly exciting, but I've been on a bit of a creative break for a few months. I I felt like was really burned out, and I needed some time to just like decompress and like not push myself so hard. So one of the projects I'm about to start, I'm going to pick back up here soon, is actually my Zodiac series.
Mm.
I've been working on it for about 3 years. Anybody who's seen me at a show is like, I know this piece. Where's the rest of the Zodiac signs? Because I have 3 of them published as prints. I don't like the third one. And I've decided I want to redo all of them. But this is just me second guessing myself. My hope is to have the full 12 Zodiac pieces finished by the end of this year. Um, they're not just Zodiac pieces, though. They're also the associated tarot cards
Mm.
that pair back to each Zodiac sign. So, for example, Pisces is also the moon card in the zodiac, and or I'm sorry, in tarot. And so I like take all the historical elements of the tarot card, and then all the like research elements or like traits of the Pisces, and I like make it into a whole new illustration. Um, as I started going along, I started realizing I was incorporating a lot of D&D like types of
Hey,
characters too.
sure. I mean, that,
My hierophant is definitely like some kind of tiefling or furbolg or something. I'm not really sure, but yeah. So I'm working on a series just for myself because I needed to do something that wasn't for a client or anybody.
there's more than 12 like classic D&D races, but there's about 12. There's
And yeah,
12 that are more prominent than the others. So not,
and it's so there's plenty to do, but it's not even supposed to be about D&D. I think it was just like an interesting happenstance. Like I'm working on Gemini right now, and the Gemini card is the lovers, and I decided to do 2 little fairies, like in a like they're real little, and they're in a like a giant uh like blossoming tree.
well,
And
that fits
they're
with the
just like
lovers card.
snuggling. And it's very cute, but it's not done yet because I drew the characters and I was like, well, I don't want to draw the tree now. I'm just gonna let this sit for like a year. Um, but yeah, so in terms of personal work, I'm just moving right along on just some digital illustrations for myself because that's what I want to do. And eventually one day I think I'd like to do a whole tarot set.
Yeah.
Um, but I have I say that, but 78 cards is a lot.
78
And
cards is a lot. 78 cards is a lot.
I can't get through 12, so I have yet to get through 12. So we'll just hold on to
Well,
that one.
just take it in stages. You start with
Yeah.
12 and then you complete the 22 of the major
Major
arcana, and
Arcana.
then
Yeah.
only got, you know, 50 some more to do after that. Like you'll
Not
get
too
there.
shabby.
Super great.
It's nice to have something that's like just mine though, because I haven't
Yeah.
done that in a minute. In terms of other things that I've got going on, uh I hope to get into Dragon Con again this year. I've done it the last 2 years. I'm not doing Origins. I didn't do OhioCon. That was last weekend. I'm trying to like cut back on the number of shows that I'm doing. Um,
It's like a
just
whole
to,
other job.
it is, it's a lot of work. And I'm just trying to kind of simplify my life because I do have a full-time job now. So it's, my like the options that I have outside of my day job of like what I can do with my time. There's a lot of things I want to do and I need to like prioritize what I'm going to
Mm,
do with that time,
yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's easy to want to do everything, and I am a little ADHD and excitable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean you can, and that's always the trap. Like when you can do anything, what do you actually do? Like
Mhm.
prioritizing those things.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, I think this has been a pleasant conversation, a lovely time chatting with you. I do want to let you tell people where I know you've got a website, so tell us your website. You mentioned I've mentioned the social medias. If you've got a social media place people would like to follow you at, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, I am I'm under lucieshearer.com for my website. It's very simple, straightforward, just my name. Lucie is spelled Lucie. And then my Instagram is lucieshearer.art. Uh, because for whatever reason, to this day, I still have not been able to get to the just my name. It's like taken, but that's fine. And then I'm also on TikTok under Lucie Sheared Art, but I don't really post to that a whole lot. I mostly just scroll. But yeah, find me on Instagram. Give me a follow because Instagram hates me. It
Oh,
hates
oh no.
everyone. No, it's all
Well,
good.
I don't know that there's a 0 day war bump that is a thing that will happen, but if there is, tell us about it.
I will let you know. Yes.
Um, all right. Well, again, thank you for your time today talking to me. This has been great. I really enjoyed working with you on the project. We'll hopefully work on something in the future, and if not, we'll at least wave on the internet, and maybe next time we're at a show, we'll definitely
Yeah,
you know have to come in person again and say hello. Um,
100%. Yeah. Thank
yeah,
you so much for having me today. This was great.
wonderful. Thank you, everybody who watched this conversation and watched the video. Thank you. Give us a like and a comment and whatever. Do the things. Interact. Interact.
Interactive
That's what they
video
want.
engagement.
That's right. Thanks so much.